When my daughter-in-law slammed a $20 bill on the counter and screamed, "Take your pathetic money and disappear," she thought she was finally getting rid of the worthless old woman who had been freeloading off her family. 3 years later, when she came crawling back begging me to save her from bankruptcy, I looked at her and said just 2 words that changed everything. But before I tell you what those words were, let me take you back to the moment that $20 became the most expensive mistake of her life. It started on a Tuesday morning in November. I'd been living with my son Caspian and his wife Seraphina in their sprawling house in Willowbrook for the past 3 years, ever since my husband passed away. I thought I was contributing to the household. I cooked their meals, maintained their garden, did their laundry, and watched their twin boys, Orion and Atlas, every single day while they worked their high-paying corporate jobs. But that morning, I woke up with excruciating stomach pains that left me gasping for breath. I'd been having these episodes for weeks, but I'd been hiding it, not wanting to burden anyone. This time was different. I could barely stand upright. I shuffled to the kitchen where Seraphina was sipping her usual expensive coffee, scrolling through her phone. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled even at 7 a.m., her designer workout clothes pristine. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege. "Seraphina, honey," I managed to say, clutching the counter for support. "I'm having terrible stomach pains. Could you possibly lend me $20? I need to get some medication from the pharmacy." She didn't even look up from her phone. $20? She scoffed, her voice dripping with irritation. "For what exactly? You probably just ate something bad. Drink some water and stop being dramatic." I tried to explain that the pain was severe, that I'd been dealing with it for weeks, but she held up her manicured hand to silence me. "Listen, Evangeline," she said, finally looking at me with cold, calculating eyes. "I'm not your personal ATM. If you can't afford basic medicine, maybe it's time you figured out your own living situation." What happened next still gives me chills to this day. Seraphina stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor with a harsh sound that made me wince. She walked over to her designer purse, a bag that probably cost more than most people make in a month, and pulled out a $20 bill. But instead of handing it to me, she slammed it down on the counter so hard that her coffee cup rattled. "There!" she spat, her voice filled with venom I'd never heard before. "Take your precious $20 and get out. I'm done pretending to care about your constant complaints and medical dramas." I stared at her in shock. "Seraphina, what do you mean get out? This is my home too, Caspian and I." "Your home?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was cruel and cutting. "This is my house, bought with my money. You've been living here rent-free for 3 years, eating our food, using our utilities, and all you do is complain. Well, I've had enough." The pain in my stomach was nothing compared to the crushing feeling in my chest. I thought about all the mornings I'd woken up at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast for her family. All the evenings I'd spent helping Orion and Atlas with their homework while she went to her yoga classes and spa appointments. I thought about the countless loads of laundry I'd folded, the floors I'd scrubbed, the elaborate dinner parties I'd catered for her friends. "But the boys," I whispered, thinking of my grandsons. "Who will take care of them after school?" Seraphina's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I'll figure it out. Maybe it's time they learn some independence anyway. You've been babying them too much." Just then, Caspian walked into the kitchen, adjusting his tie and reaching for his briefcase. He looked between us, sensing the tension, but clearly not wanting to get involved. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Your mother needs to find her own place," Seraphina announced, crossing her arms. "I've given her money for whatever medical issue she's dramatizing today, and now it's time for her to go." I watched my son's face, waiting for him to defend me, to remind his wife that I was family. But he just sighed and shook his head. "Mom, maybe Seraphina's right. You've been here a while, and it might be good for you to have your own space again." Those words from my own son hit me like a physical blow. I had raised Caspian by myself after his father walked out when he was just 8 years old. I worked 3 jobs to put him through college, sold my car to help with his law school tuition, and gave him every penny of my inheritance from my parents to help him start his practice. But as I looked at the two of them standing there, Seraphina with her arms crossed in triumph, Caspian avoiding my eyes, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't family to them. I was free labor. I see, I said quietly, picking up the $20 bill with trembling fingers. I understand perfectly now. For the past 3 years, I had convinced myself that I was helping, that I was wanted. But the truth was, I had been nothing more than a live-in maid and babysitter. While Seraphina spent her days at boutique fitness classes and expensive brunches with her friends, I was scrubbing toilets and chasing after her children. While Caspian built his successful law practice, I was doing all the household management that allowed him to focus purely on his career. I thought about my late husband's life insurance money, the entire $50,000 that I had given to Caspian and Seraphina as a gift for their down payment on this very house, the house they were now kicking me out of. I thought about my Social Security checks that I had been endorsing over to them each month to help with expenses, money that had apparently bought me nothing but 3 years of servitude. "You know what?" I said, standing up straighter despite the pain still radiating through my abdomen. "You're absolutely right. It is time for me to have my own space." Seraphina looked surprised by my calm response. She had probably expected tears, begging, or dramatic protests, but something had shifted inside me in that moment. A door had closed on one chapter of my life, and I could almost feel another one opening. "I'll pack my things today," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "And don't worry about the boys. You're right. They do need to learn independence." I walked toward the stairs, each step feeling lighter than the last, even with the physical pain. Behind me, I heard Seraphina whisper to Caspian, "That was easier than I thought it would be." If only she knew what she had just set in motion. I spent the next few hours in my room, but I wasn't packing like I had told them. Instead, I was sitting on my bed with my laptop, researching something I should have done years ago. I was looking up my rights as a tenant, and, more importantly, I was researching my financial options. You see, there was something Seraphina and Caspian didn't know. Something I had never told them because I didn't want them to think I was bragging or trying to make them feel guilty about their success. Before I moved in with them, I hadn't just been a lonely widow living on Social Security. I had been a successful small business owner who sold a thriving catering company when my husband got sick. The money from that sale, nearly $200,000, was sitting in a savings account that I had never touched. I had been living off my Social Security and giving them that money each month not because I needed to, but because I wanted to contribute to our family. I had also been quietly investing in stock picks that my late husband had taught me about. Nothing flashy, just steady, reliable companies. Over the 3 years I'd been living here, those investments had grown considerably. But I had never mentioned any of this because I believed we were a family, and families shared their resources. Now I realized how naive I had been. I called my bank and spoke to my financial advisor, a lovely woman named Cordelia, who had been managing my portfolio. "Mrs. Blackthorne," she said, "I'm so glad you called. I've been wanting to discuss some opportunities with you. Your investments have performed better than we projected." As she went through the numbers, I felt my breath catch. Between my business sale money, my investments, and the compound interest, I was looking at over $400,000 in assets. Not millionaire status yet, but certainly enough to start completely over. "I want to liquidate some of these investments," I told her. "I'm making some major life changes." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my room and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to leave and find some modest apartment like they expected. I was going to disappear completely and build something amazing. I opened my laptop and started researching small towns in nearby states, places where I could start fresh where nobody knew me. That evening, when Seraphina and Caspian came home, they found me sitting calmly in the living room with my suitcase beside me. But what they didn't expect was the smile on my face. "Mom," Caspian said uncertainly, "we should talk about this. Maybe we were too hasty earlier." Seraphina shot him a warning look, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was probably realizing that losing her free childcare and housekeeping might be more inconvenient than she had anticipated. "Oh no," I said pleasantly. "You were absolutely right. It's time for me to have my own space." I handed Caspian an envelope. "Here's my forwarding address once I get settled. I'll send it to you once I find a place." "Where are you going?" Seraphina asked, and for the first time she sounded uncertain. "I'm exploring some options," I replied vaguely. "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." Just then, Orion and Atlas came running into the room, their school backpacks sliding off their shoulders as they launched themselves at me for their usual after-school hugs. "Grandma Evie!" Atlas shouted. "Can you help me with my science project tonight?" "And I need help practicing my spelling words," Orion added. I knelt down and hugged them both tightly, breathing in their little boy scent of playground dirt and strawberry shampoo. "Boys, Grandma is going to be living somewhere else now, but I love you both very much." Their faces fell in confusion. "Why?" Orion asked, looking between me and his parents. "Because sometimes grown-ups need to make changes," I said gently. "But you're going to be just fine. Your mommy and daddy will take good care of you." I saw Seraphina's face pale as the reality hit her. No more built-in babysitter for date nights. No more free after-school care. No more elaborate home-cooked dinners waiting when she got home from her leisurely days. "Mom," Caspian said quietly, "let's not be dramatic about this. You can stay until you find a reasonable place nearby." But I was already standing up, my decision made. "That's very kind, but I've already made arrangements." I had called a hotel near the airport and booked a room while I figured out my next steps. As I walked toward the door with my suitcase, Atlas started to cry. "I don't want Grandma Evie to leave." It broke my heart, but I knew this was the right choice. I had spent 3 years pouring all my love and energy into this family, only to be discarded the moment I needed the smallest bit of help in return. "Take care of yourselves," I said at the door, and walked out into the cool November evening. The next morning, Seraphina's panic began to show. She called me at 7 a.m., her voice stressed and high-pitched. "Evangeline, I need you to come back today. I have an important client meeting and I can't find anyone to pick up the boys from school. You know they don't take the bus." I was sitting in my hotel room, sipping coffee and browsing real estate listings in a charming town called Millfield, about 3 hours away. "I'm sorry, Seraphina, but I'm no longer available for childcare. You'll need to make other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" she practically shrieked. "Do you know how much professional babysitters cost? And I can't just leave work every day at 3 p.m. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I replied calmly. "You're a very resourceful woman." Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. Caspian calling about the boys crying for their grandmother. Seraphina calling about missed meetings because she couldn't find reliable childcare. More calls about the house falling apart because apparently neither of them actually knew how to do laundry or operate the dishwasher properly. But the call that really showed me who they truly were came on Friday. "Mom," Caspian said, his voice stern. "This has gone on long enough. Seraphina says you're being vindictive and manipulative. Come home and stop this childish behavior." "Childish," I repeated. "Caspian, your wife threw me out of the house because I asked for $20 when I was in pain. How exactly is my response childish?" "You're punishing us by taking away your help," he said. "That's not fair to the boys." I realized then that he still didn't get it. In his mind, I existed solely to serve their family's needs. My feelings, my pain, my dignity, none of that mattered compared to their convenience. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said quietly. "I'm simply living my own life now, just like you wanted." Meanwhile, I had been busy. I had found a perfect little house in Millfield, a Victorian cottage with a wraparound porch and a garden that had been neglected but had good bones. The owner was an elderly man named Theodore who was moving to assisted living. and he was motivated to sell quickly. I made an offer that afternoon, and by Monday, I was the owner of my new home. But I wasn't done yet. I had a plan that was much bigger than just moving away. Millfield was exactly what I needed. A town of about 3,000 people where nobody knew my story or my connection to Caspian and Seraphina. I moved into my cottage and immediately felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. But I wasn't planning to quietly fade into retirement. I had an idea that had been brewing since the moment Seraphina threw that $20 bill at me. You see, during my years of running my catering company, I had developed something special. A line of gourmet spice blends and sauces that my customers constantly begged me to bottle and sell. I had always been too busy with the day-to-day catering work to pursue it. But now I had time, money, and motivation. I spent my first month in Millfield setting up a commercial kitchen in my basement and perfecting my recipes. My signature blend, a smoky barbecue rub I called Grandmother's Secret, had been the star of every catering event I'd ever done. I also had something that many small business owners lacked, a deep understanding of social media marketing, thanks to all those evenings I'd spent helping Orion and Atlas with their school projects on various platforms. While Seraphina had dismissed me as just an old woman, I had been quietly learning about online business trends. I created social media accounts for Evangeline's kitchen and started posting videos of myself cooking with my spice blends in my cozy cottage kitchen. There was something appealing about the aesthetic, a silver-haired grandmother in a beautiful kitchen, sharing family recipes with genuine warmth. But here's where it got interesting. I didn't just sell spice blends. I started offering online cooking classes, teaching people how to create restaurant-quality meals at home. My years of catering experience had given me techniques that home cooks were eager to learn. Within 6 months, I had over 50,000 followers across my platforms. My spice blends were selling out as fast as I could make them, and my online cooking classes had a waiting list. I hired 2 local women to help with production and shipping, and I was already looking into renting commercial space in town. The local newspaper ran a feature story about my business, calling me Millfield's entrepreneurial grandmother. Other media outlets picked up the story, and suddenly I was getting interview requests from food magazines and business publications. But the most satisfying part? I hadn't contacted Caspian or Seraphina once since I left. For all they knew, I was living in some modest apartment, barely getting by. By the 1-year mark, Evangeline's kitchen had become $1 million business. I had expanded into cookware, cookbook publishing, and even had a deal in the works with a major grocery chain to carry my spice blends nationally. I had bought a larger property on the outskirts of Millfield, a beautiful farmhouse with commercial kitchen space and room for my growing team of employees. I drove a new SUV, wore clothes that made me feel confident and successful, and woke up every morning excited about the day ahead. More importantly, I had built genuine relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. My employees became like family to me, and I was a beloved member of the Millfield community. I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur Over 50 magazine, and a major food network approached me about developing a cooking show. The shy, diminished woman who had begged for $20 seemed like a different person entirely. Meanwhile, I occasionally heard through mutual acquaintances that things weren't going well back in Willowbrook. Seraphina had gone through 3 different babysitters, all of whom had quit because of her demanding attitude. Caspian's law practice was struggling because he was constantly having to leave work for childcare emergencies. The boys were acting out at school, clearly missing the stability I had provided, but I felt no satisfaction in their struggles. I had moved beyond anger into something much more powerful, complete indifference. Then, on a Tuesday morning while I was filming a video for my online cooking series, my assistant Melody knocked on my kitchen door. "Mrs. Blackthorne," she said, "there's a woman here who says she's your daughter-in-law. She's asking to speak with you." Through the window, I could see a BMW with Willowbrook plates parked in my driveway. Seraphina stood beside it, but she looked different. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. I took a deep breath and smiled at Melody. Tell her I'm busy filming, but if she wants to wait, she can sit in the reception area. I wasn't the same woman who had left with a single suitcase anymore. This was my domain now, and she was the visitor. I made Seraphina wait for 3 hours while I finished my filming and attended to several important business calls. When I finally emerged from my kitchen, she was pacing frantically in my reception area, checking her phone repeatedly. Evangeline, she said, rushing toward me. Thank God. I've been looking for you everywhere. She looked me up and down, taking in my professional appearance, my confident posture, and the bustling business operation around us. I could see the confusion and calculation in her eyes. Seraphina, I said coolly, what brings you to Millfield? The boys miss you terribly, she stammered. Atlas cries for you every night and Orion's grades are dropping. Caspian thought maybe you'd want to visit them. I gestured for her to sit down in one of the comfortable chairs in my reception area. That's unfortunate about the boys, but I'm very busy these days. My business keeps me quite occupied. Her eyes darted around the space, taking in the shelves lined with my products, the professional photography setup, the employees bustling around with purpose. Business? She asked weakly. Yes, Evangeline's kitchen has become quite successful. We're expanding nationally next month. I handed her one of my business cards. Perhaps you've seen our products in stores. I watched as the pieces fell into place in her mind. The expensive car in my driveway, the professional operation, the confidence in my voice. This wasn't the broken old woman she had expected to find living in poverty somewhere. You're successful, she said, as if the words were foreign in her mouth. Very, I confirmed. Now, what did you really come here for? Because I doubt it was just to tell me about the boys missing me. Her facade cracked then, and the desperation she'd been hiding spilled out. Evangeline, we need your help. Caspian's practice is struggling because he can't focus on work with all the childcare issues. I can't maintain my career and manage everything at home. The house is falling apart. We're drowning in debt from all the babysitting and housekeeping services we've had to hire. She paused, looking around my thriving business again. We thought, maybe you could come back. We could make it worth your while this time. I almost laughed. After throwing me out for asking for $20, she was now asking me to save them from their financial troubles. Make it worth my while? I repeated. How exactly? We could pay you, she said quickly. A real salary for helping with the boys and the house. And we were thinking, maybe you could invest in Caspian's practice, help us get back on our feet. There it was, the real reason for her visit. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my designer blouse, one that probably cost more than the $20 she had thrown at me a year ago. Seraphina, I said, my voice pleasant but firm. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You threw me out of your house when I was sick and asked for $20 for medication. You told me I was being dramatic and that I needed to find my own living situation. You made it clear that I was a burden and that you were done with me. Her face flushed red. Evangeline, I was having a bad day. I didn't mean... And now, I continued, you want me to come back and not only provide free labor again, but also invest my money in bailing you out of your financial problems? The room had gone quiet. My employees were pretending to work, but I could tell they were listening to every word. Melody, in particular, looked shocked by what she was hearing. It's not like that, Seraphina said desperately. We're family. Family helps each other. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. Yes, you're right about that. Family does help each other. Family doesn't throw each other out when they're sick. Family doesn't treat each other like unpaid servants. Family doesn't demand money after years of disrespect. I walked over to the wall where my magazine covers and business awards were displayed. Do you see all of this, Seraphina? This is what I built after you decided I was worthless. This $1 million business exists because you freed me from the prison of your expectations. Her mouth fell open. $1 million? Oh yes, I said, turning back to her. Evangeline's kitchen is worth well over $1 million now. I have a cookbook deal, a television show in development, and investors calling me every week with opportunities. I could see her mind working, probably calculating how much money she had just walked away from a year ago. "The boys," she tried again weakly. "They really do miss you." "I'm sure they do," I said, and for the first time, my voice softened slightly. "And I miss them too, but they have parents who are capable of taking care of them. You just don't want to be inconvenienced by actually parenting your own children." I walked to the door and held it open. "I think this conversation is over, Seraphina. You can find your way back to Willowbrook." She stood up shakily, clutching her purse. "Evangeline, please. We're desperate." "I know," I said simply. "And I don't care." I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated Seraphina's determination when it came to money. 3 days later, I was in my office when Melody knocked again. "Mrs. Blackthorne, your son is here. He says it's an emergency." Caspian stood in my reception area wearing his most expensive suit, clearly trying to look successful and professional, but I could see the stress lines around his eyes and the way his shoulders sagged with defeat. "Hello, Caspian," I said neutrally. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you an enormous apology. I had no idea about your business, about how successful you've become. I'm so proud of you." I noticed he didn't apologize for throwing me out or supporting his wife's cruel behavior. He was only impressed now that he knew I had money. "Thank you," I said simply, waiting for him to get to his real purpose. "The thing is, Mom, I'm in serious trouble. My practice is failing and we're behind on the mortgage. Seraphina told me about your business and I thought, maybe we could work together. You could be a silent partner in my law firm. I could handle the legal side of your business expansion." I looked at my son, this man I had sacrificed everything to raise and educate, and felt nothing but pity for him. "Caspian, when I was living with you, I gave you thousands of dollars every month from my Social Security. I did all your household management for free. I provided childcare that would have cost you over $3,000 a month. And when I asked for $20 for medicine when I was in pain, your wife threw me out and you supported her decision." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we both made mistakes." "No," I interrupted. "You both made choices. You chose to treat me like an employee when it was convenient and discard me when it wasn't. You chose to let your wife humiliate me. You chose your marriage over your mother." I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the beautiful property I now owned. "I chose to rebuild my life without you, and it's been the best decision I ever made." "But the boys need their grandmother," he said, playing his last card. I turned back to him. "The boys need parents who can take care of them without relying on their grandmother to do all the work. Maybe this struggle will teach you both some responsibility." I walked to the door. "Goodbye, Caspian. Don't come back here again." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, processing the encounter. I had expected to feel anger or sadness, but instead, I felt something unexpected: complete peace. I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life permanently. 2 years later, I was sitting on the porch of my farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. My business had expanded beyond my wildest dreams. I now had 50 employees, 3 cookbook bestsellers, and a hit cooking show called Evangeline's Kitchen, from farm to table. But more importantly, I was surrounded by people who genuinely loved and valued me. My employees had become like a chosen family, and the Millfield community had embraced me completely. I was dating a wonderful man named Sebastian, a retired professor who appreciated both my independence and my success. Melody came out onto the porch with a cup of tea and the mail. "Mrs. Blackthorne, there's a letter here from your grandsons." I opened it carefully. Inside were 2 handwritten notes from Orion and Atlas, now 12 years old. They wrote about school, their friends, and how much they missed me. At the bottom, Atlas had written, "Grandma Evie, Mom and Dad fight all the time now. We wish you could come visit us." My heart ached for them, but I knew that returning to that toxic situation wouldn't help anyone. Instead, I sat down and wrote them a letter back, telling them how much I loved them and that they could always reach out to me when they turned 18. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected email from a local news reporter in Willowbrook. Apparently, Caspian's law practice had finally failed completely, and the family had lost their house. Seraphina had filed for divorce and moved back in with her parents. The reporter had somehow connected me to the story and wanted to interview me about my rags to riches journey. I politely declined the interview. Their story wasn't my story anymore. That evening, Sebastian and I sat on my porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in my garden. "Do you ever regret leaving?" he asked gently. I thought about it for a moment, remembering the pain and humiliation of that morning when Seraphina threw $20 at me and told me to get out. "Never," I said, leaning into his warm embrace. That $20 was the best investment I ever made. It bought me my freedom. And as I looked around at the beautiful life I had built, filled with purpose, respect, and genuine love, I knew that every difficult moment had been worth it. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. My daughter-in-law thought she was throwing me away, but she was actually setting me free to become the woman I was always meant to be. The woman who now had everything she had ever wanted, and never had to ask anyone for $20